Welcome to week 3 of the NRC01 Personal Learning MOOC. And I'm your host, Stephen Downs, and we've had a fun week so far with our website crashing. So I might as well explain this right off the bat. Our service provider changed the location of our domain name service location. The place that records what the address lpss.me points to, and the new service doesn't do .me addresses, and so it pointed to nothing, and that's where it sat for the last 3 days. But I've checked it out, and we are up and running again. So we do have a website again. Unfortunately, it came up maybe 10 minutes before this Hangout, so I'm not sure how many people will be able to see this live, but that's okay. We can always record for posterity, and when we're recording for posterity, any number of people can see it. I hope to be joined by a guest today, but again, with communications being a little bit out there, we'll see how it goes. Even if not, still lots of stuff to do today, and I'm going to get right to it. The topic for today is the cMOOC and the xMOOC. What's the difference between them? Why did we go the connectivist route at all? And I got a few slides here set up just to begin. So we'll begin with a few slides and we'll take it from there. I'm not going to linger for a long time on this. If I look away, it's because I have 2 monitors going here, right? So I have one here and one here. So, yeah. Okay, so let's remember how to share my screen. So, right. So now we're sharing the screen, and here's the slides, and I bet you I can even make them big so that you can see it really beautifully. There we go. So this is the classic model that I want to begin with, and this is a typical course. It's in a Moodle environment. It may as well be an Open edX environment. Doesn't really make a lot of difference. Actually, you get a bit more of a dashboard in the Moodle environment because you have the course menu at the side. You have the outline, which is very much like the outline of the Open edX. You have some activities, assignments, chats, forums, etc. You actually have a calendar here. The Open edX doesn't really have one of those, plus file manager. It fits the classic model of a course. Objectives, competencies to define your course. There's very often a pre-test or a warm-up. Then you'll get the obligatory content presentation, much like we're doing now. A learning activity, then, of course, some discussion and reflection, then a test or a quiz or something like that, and then we'll think about that, think about how it went. Very classic, very linear model. Here's the MOOC discussion list, and you can see that it's a really typical discussion list, and it begins with topics, has forums that you subscribe to or unsubscribe from. I find the Moodle discussions actually a bit complicated to work with because you never know if you're in a discussion, not in a discussion, etc. But the thing is, everybody comes here to the centralized Moodle place and they have their discussion, and it can get pretty chaotic and pretty confusing. The Moodle discussion list has management enrollment, linear structure, everything's organized. There's this set curriculum in the course to be remembered, a competitive kind of assessment. And the idea, and Moodle is explicit about this, that knowledge is something that's socially created, socially constructed. Moodle is specifically designed to be a constructivist type of learning environment. That explains a lot of its popularity, but it does explain a lot of its weaknesses. Moodle is one way of looking at online learning. MOOC is another way of looking at online learning, and especially the connectivist MOOCs that we're talking about this week. Here is a MOOC, a connectivist MOOC. It's the change course that we ran in 2011. It looks a lot like the traditional MOOC. It's got stuff, the regular stuff on the left-hand side, how the course works, who the facilitators are, etc. It's got a calendar just like Moodle. There's some course content. We've actually got an embedded Twitter conversation. You can do that in other software as well. So on the face of it, it doesn't look a whole lot different, but it is very different on the inside. One of the really big differences, and one of the reasons why we needed to create our own technology, was that we wanted our course to be open, like really, really, really open, so that you don't have to sign up and fill in an email address and all of that in order to see course content. So we did things like we used live stream for webcasting because people could just watch it. That's why I'm using, actually, even now, I'm using the Hangout on Air, because you can just go to the event page and click start viewing, and you're viewing. And we have 7 viewers now. I don't know who they are. Maybe in theory I could figure it out, but it doesn't matter. It's good that it's just so open. You just come in and you view the session. We discovered in our MOOCs, by making it open like this, we got this interesting mix of people, from the very novice to the very experienced. Another thing about our MOOCs was the network structure. And this is what openness will do for you as well. This was a diagram that one of the participants in our MOOCs created to talk about, or to represent the structure of the course. You won't see a typical course structured like this, but if you look at it, you see the network design in the middle. You see, well, a lot of hot air, but also some milk of human kindness, USB sockets, Grasshopper going down, Facebook, Illumination or Illuminate, Twitter, etc., etc. That's why Grasshopper was such a key part of things. Grasshopper did content aggregation. Grasshopper was the tool that brought all the different bits of content from widely dispersed sources on the internet and brought them in together and put them in a form where we could share them with all of the people in the course. There are other feed aggregators out there. For example, there's Feedly. There used to be Google Reader, so Google killed it. There's something called the Old Reader. Outlook, in theory, can be used as a feed reader. I wouldn't try. But there's no real reader that actually did anything else but read RSS feeds. Yeah, with Google Reader, you could sort of produce a feed of the stuff that you would read, but it wasn't the same. Grasshopper is a feed reader, brings everything together, but it's also a website generator and an email newsletter generator. So by putting in feed aggregation with the recombining and sharing or feeding forward of resources, I was able to create something that performed multiple tasks and made a cMOOC possible. One of the things that people commented on a lot in the connectivist MOOCs, and this was a deliberate thing that we set up, was on the abundance of content. There was a lot of content in these MOOCs. Part of the reason for this was we didn't want to pin people down to a particular curriculum, and part of the reason was that we wanted people to find content and appealed to them and to contribute it. And this resulted in far more content than Nikon deciding to interrupt my podcast. We wanted people to look at the content and pick out the content that looked most interesting or most relevant to them. This was a way where each person could get their own individual perspective on the subject at hand, but without us having to try to prescribe some sort of differentiated instruction. And George said during the courses that the first task of a student in a MOOC is to learn how to select what is interesting and relevant content. So we talked about this, and we talked about different ways of understanding this, because it was really hard for people to conceptualize even. It was hard for people to even conceptualize. Am I stopped now? Am I stopped? It was hard for people to conceptualize just exactly how to manage that kind of abundant flow of content. And so we would talk about, or well, I guess I, more than we, would talk about things like a football game, and you're attending a football game, and there's 11 people here and 11 people here, and they're all doing different things, and you cannot possibly watch what each person on the field is doing, but you pick and you choose. And you focus your attention, and you get your own individualized version of the football game. Or recipes. There's more food and more ways of preparing food than you could possibly consume in a lifetime. And so nobody tries, right? But we pick and choose among those recipes that we find that we like, that are good for us, maybe good nutritionally, maybe good with respect to taste. And we pick and choose. You know, it's like the buffet at a restaurant. You go to a restaurant, there's a big buffet with, 15 kinds of meat and 14 salads and so on. You cannot eat everything. You pick and choose the food that you want. So there are ways of working with an abundance of content. And the point to be made here is that the abundance of content is what makes the cMOOC possible. There's a lot of talk about the social aspect of learning online versus the solo aspect of learning online. We talk about self-directed, learner-directed learning, and the conclusion that people jump to is you can't do that because people don't know what they want, or they don't know what they don't know, etc. But there's no requirement that self-managed learning or self-guided learning be solo. It can also work socially. And, Dave Cormier, when he talked about the MOOC, he talked about success in a MOOC, and he had these 5 steps. And you can agree with them, disagree with them, it doesn't matter. The main thing here is that you're not working alone. Sure, you orient yourself a bit, but then the next 3 steps, declare, network, and cluster, these 3 steps are steps that are taking place in the social environment. And declaring, for example, this is a powerful form of interaction, because when you declare, it's like you're making a statement that other people will hold you to. Now, they won't, but you feel like they will. And so you can see this interaction, or this back and forth between working on your own and working in the social environment. Tony Bates talking about where George and I fit within the context of thinkers such as R.H. Taney, Ivan Illich, and Paulo Freire, who believe strongly in self-education as part of their broader socialist views on equality. They need to open access to knowledge and to educate the workers in order to break the existing hegemony, etc. That's reading a lot into what we were up to. We were called cyber communists, and which I thought was quite funny. when we offered our first MOOC. And you know, I mean, and you know, I do have a quote unquote broader socialist view on equality, but that's not the foundation for the belief. That's the outcome of the belief. I mean, we begin with how people learn, how people work, how people are able to accomplish the most in their lives. And it leads us to views like self-education, leads us to views like equity in society. You know, if we're looking at, for example, how to improve education in society, well, the greatest predictor of educational outcome is socioeconomic status. So we want to achieve equity in society as a means of improving education in society, as well as improving education in society as a means of promoting equity in society. It's not a politically based movement. At least I wouldn't say that. Takes me a second to flip back and forth. The other thing too, and I think I emphasize this more than George does, but I think it's something that really is at the core of our understanding of what learning is. You know, we've criticized the traditional theory of learning based on the idea that, you know, this mechanism where you present knowledge to, or, you know, present content to be consumed, that this is an ineffective model of learning. And so the question comes up, what is the effective model of learning? And what I'm proposing here is that knowledge as something that is grown, something that is developed, is the model that I think fits more what we're trying to do with the connectivist styles of MOOCs. I use the analogy a lot. Knowledge, you know, is developing knowledge is a lot like developing a muscle, right? And you know, you would never talk about muscle transfer, you know, or, you know, presenting muscle on a video screen and somebody looking at the video screen and acquiring the muscle. That would be absurd. It would be laughable. But knowledge is the same kind of thing. The creation of knowledge literally is the formation of connections between neurons in the brain. That's what knowledge is. Knowledge is the state of connectivity. Learning is the growth and development and traversing of these connections. So there's a picture of learning here that's very different. So instead of presenting you with content, we're trying to create an environment in which you do stuff. Now, we can't force you to do stuff, but we can try to create the conditions where if you did stuff, you would gain, you would, if you will, acquire some of these mental muscles. So here's what our environment, our learning environment looked like. This is the structure of CCK08. It's the very first MOOC in the world. It's the one that excuse me, George and I developed. You can see the Moodle forum there in the upper left. You can see also a fairly structured wiki that we used in the center, upper center. But you can also see all the different pieces, all the, you know, Technorati, Page Flakes, Flickr, Delicious, SlideShare, Google Groups, etc., as well as the blog, the daily mailing, and the rest, all connected together. And it's what we were trying to do is create a course that was made up of connections the way we think that knowledge is made up of connections. And learning in the course would involve you going from place to place, moving about these connections, sending signals or messages or content or whatever from one of these entities to another, just immersing yourself in this environment, being, if you will, a node in this network. And through this immersive process, you develop that capacity. You develop, if you will, again, those mental muscles. The question is, of course, did it work? And the argument that I think it worked. And the reason why I think it worked, well, is twofold. One reason why I think it worked is we had a bunch of people uh, learn a lot and go on and develop careers and theses, etc., based on this idea. Another reason why I think it worked is MOOCs became this really big thing. And yeah, it's true that they didn't develop the way we developed. They did it a bit differently, but this concept of open online learning, that was a thing. And that was a thing that it turned out that people had a lot of affinity for, a lot of desire for. So here's another diagram of the MOOC, or as I like to call this diagram, duckworks. And again, you see the network structure of that. And it's interesting because you see the pattern in the network. And this is a really important part of cognition, is detecting patterns in phenomena. And if, I mean, people talk about, well, how does a network think? How does a set of connections between neurons think? Because, they're not doing formal logic, or they're not representing sentences. What they're doing to think is they're doing a process of pattern recognition. And here are some of the MOOCs that we had in those early years. And we have our visitor, Don. Welcome, Don.
Hello.
So I've just been talking about the original MOOCs. I'll drop out of the screen share here. There we go. So you were around during those original years. You've been following what we've been doing all along. And one of the things that you found important, at least in your email that exchange that you've had with me, is open educational resources and open learning. And what do you think, or well, what do I want to ask you? I want to ask you if you think that having an open MOOC is essential, or can you accomplish the same goals even if the resources are not openly accessible the way, for example, they're not openly accessible in edX without a registration? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, sorry, I'm catching up.
Yeah, I can actually hear it.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to turn off the other stream, actually. Let me just, basically, my thoughts are open is good. I think the main issue I'm hammering at or trying to understand is there will be times when somebody will want to be recognized for working on open things.
Yeah, you're definitely getting an echo there, right?
There we go. I think I got it. So, okay. So, yeah, so basically, open is good. And I've been doing some work with Doctors Without Borders and trying to develop what they call personal learning environments, and that can probably get into a whole other discussion. But they recognize that there's no way that they can provide the kind of learning content that people are demanding, and people just learn on the go, and a lot of it's experiential, et cetera. And so there are people, relate this to what they call the 70-20-10. Mm-hmm. So I think the provision of open learning resources is great. I think informal learning is great. Experiential learning, reaching out to people, trying to solve problems, using tools, performance support is great. The main issue for me is how to navigate within that, and sometimes you actually want to be recognized for where you're at. And it could be for recruitment on a new mission if it's MSF, could be for a new role, or it could be maybe you're going back in, you're leaving the movement and going into a new career. So, that's brings things back to my obsession, which is e-credentials, open badges. But that's chicken and egg. That's why I'm interested in recognition, because I'm interested in RPL, recognition of prior learning, and portfolios.
So if we had used badges, let's say in the original MOOCs that we did, or even this MOOC that we're doing now, it's, still in the back of my mind to do that, if I can keep the website up. What do you think it would look like?
Well, it would depend on the motivations of the learners. So I did a bit of a straw poll using Twitter, and I was asking people, what's your interest in taking this course? And I got, I think, 5 responses, and most of them said it was ed tech research. So, using that as criterion, I doubt many of the people would be interested in badges as a portable, transferable value to have. But for example, there's this huge LMS called disasterready.org for the humanitarian sector. And it's basically, it comes out of what's called Cornerstone On Demand Foundation. And it's, basically putting their Cornerstone LMS out there, and it's a really clever marketing thing that they do. But people, end users can take these courses for free and identify themselves as being committed enough to start learning about humanitarian learning, etc. Recently, they added badges to that, and that was actually Atish Gonzalez co-presented with us at the EPIC last year, talking a little bit about that. And he's since moved on, and he's applying that to his new place, which is the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. So if somebody is a future leader and they want to demonstrate that they're a future leader, how could they do that, especially if people don't know them, intimately, and don't, aren't intimately aware of their work, and so they don't necessarily have a huge amount of social capital, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's it. And I guess the best example I see of that is something that I hope to bridge for them is the example of Deacon Digital, and how they're essentially badging master's degrees. They're modularizing the master's degree, so you can use recognition of professional practice to challenge for a master's degree, with the exception of one module which relates to the specific subject matter that you actually have to take a more conventional degree. But I would say about 80 to 90% of the degree could be modular, could be badged, and it's based on higher level soft skills, leadership, communication, things like that.
So I have the disasterready.org site here, and according to the site, they have a training library of 600 titles, access on any device, the social connection, which, as I was saying earlier on, is something you can do even with self-managed learning, as well as structured curricula. I'm not going to sign up while we're on this. The other one was Deacon,
Deacon Digital, DEAKIN Digital.
Right.
That's one George Siemens is an advisor for.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he's working with them, and essentially it's unbundling the formal credentialing at the university level. It's a spin-off of Deakin University, and it may or may not work. I don't see huge volume there yet, but essentially people have to. It's targeted at people in their 30s who want to take a master's, may not have the time or the money, and basically they sign up for these badges that relate to a degree, except they call them, what do they call them? Well, it's recognition of professional practice. That's what they call it in general. But
so here's the Deacon site, and with it looks like Walter White on the front, but I'm sure it isn't. And we're browsing through the credentials here. And so here's the credential guide for February 2016. We're just waiting for that to pop up, and it's a PDF. So this is a longish guide, but they're the looks like they're the different credentials that you can apply for. Where did these come from? Dawn, do you know?
Well, they're linked to the AQF, the Australian Qualifications Framework, and they're essentially graduate outcomes that are, I forget what it's, level 7 or level 8 in the AQF. So essentially, these would be graduate learning outcomes. So they're intentionally soft, So communications in general. Are you communicating at what they see as the master's level? So you would be a mid-career professional, probably an early, middle management or, junior management. Are you communicating at that level? So there's an element of leadership in a lot of this stuff. And, what evidence do you have? And, can you bring forward that evidence? And then they also have like an interview. And so it's targeted evidence packages and also structured interview, or well, I don't know how structured the interview is, but essentially they say it's more rigorous than if you took the masters. That you actually spent the money to take the masters, because you actually have to demonstrate it. I would think it would get easier after you did your first one. You could sort of remix and go after other ones. And that's typically what happens with portfolios. But it's a really interesting model. I think it costs you 500 Australian per credential. So let's say there are 8 of them, or 9, say, plus the course. So at least for the modular part, it would be 4,500 Australian. Which,
happily, they're Australian dollars.
Sorry?
Say happily they're Australian dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding. Sorry about that, all of you there in Australia. One of the concerns that I would have with this model is, and of course other people view it as a strength, is the requirement for an actual human to be doing the interviewing, because it's obviously a very hands-on, labor-intensive process, isn't it?
Right. So that's what I mean. I'm not entirely sure it's going to be a sustainable model for them, or what might happen to the cost, et cetera. I mean, they're having to, I guess, justify themselves to registrars and things like that at Deakin, even though they are a spin-off. They're not directly part of the university, but they leverage university resources. So there are subject matter experts who are, I think, recruited from the university to examine this stuff.
Okay, I want to change the pace a little bit here, and I got in the Twitter feed some interesting things from Raffaellina Rossetti has been doing sketch notes of this course. So I'm going to share those because I thought people might be interested in them. And certainly they'll appreciate being able to see them. So here's the from the first set. So this is the intro to the course with the 6 overall things that we're looking at, or the 7 overall things that we're looking at through the 7 weeks, and then some of the discussion. So I think that's kind of interesting. Oh, and I want to back up. Thank you for making me look so young. And this now moves into, this is the transfer of information theory that I was just criticizing a little bit earlier on. And this is the traditional model of learning that we were looking at, the model before MOOCs. And it's interesting, it's something to think about, Don, is how much the credentialing depends on a traditional model of learning versus how would it work with a less traditional model of learning where you're pursuing your own learning objectives as opposed to predefined objectives.
Right. And, I was reaching out to Deakin very quickly on that. In my blog post, I was talking about some other models. And one thing on the Badge Alliance chat I was just on, I was saying, one model could be, and especially this could help like an impecunious professional association who wants to support, say, PD and can't afford to be, examining critically everybody's badges or everybody's evidence. Is, as a professional, you could claim a badge and then put forward a package of evidence to support that and just put it out there. And other people could look at that and they could either endorse it or not. Right, so that's, to me, that's respecting the learner more, both in terms of what they choose to be recognized for, and also, how the assessment happens and how that assessment is, the evidence is assessed.
Yeah, it's funny. I think these sketch notes, are that kind of principle in practice where we can actually use this presentation of visual evidence to see whether or not they really did get the concept that was in the paper or in the talk or whatever. And here we have, excuse me, for example, the distinction between personal and personalized represented visually, and I'm taking a quick look at this, and it looks to me like Rafaelina got the concept and represented it well. And so, I mean, I think that's an interesting way of thinking of it. So here we have more again from the original readings of the course, and then there's another set. Here they are. And now we're looking at some of the earlier presentations in the first week, second week of the course. Here, for example, is the representation of content aggregation. We talked about content aggregation as being important in the first part. So now this goes beyond what Grasshopper does. Grasshopper, there's a mistake, right? It says RRS instead of RSS, Rafaelina. But Grasshopper would harvest RSS and OAI and Atom and Twitter and Facebook, and that's about it. But here, in the wider concept of aggregation, we're looking at everything from email to Coursera to SharePoint, etc. And then in the publication, we're not just looking at publishing a newsletter or anything like that. We're actually looking at the creation of, if you will, a graph of entities, everything from articles to videos to persons, etc. The organization of this graph is the representation of your own knowledge. So, and here's another concept from the LPSS document about the personal learning assistant. It says, learner is not a product. I have to think about that. I mean, in a sense, if the process of learning is actually the growth and development of your neural network, of the structure of your brain, literally, then you, the learner, actually are the outcome. And so the trick to credentialing, to get back to Don, is the presentation of the learner as the badge or credential. And I'm glad to see that you're participating in the time-honored tradition of connectivist courses of having a cat on screen.
Connecting with my cat. That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. I think I agree with you. I think the learner is the product, and a friend of mine likes to say in his emails, it's not what you know, it's what you can think of in time. And so I think of a person as a walking, talking portfolio of what they know. So in that sense, I guess it is a product.
So we've seen now. So we covered some of the concepts behind connectivism and why we did the connectivist courses. Talked with Don a bit about credentialing and recognition. We looked at these sketch notes themselves, an interesting form of artifact. One of the things that I thought about, I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes by jumping into the Grasshopper environment so people can have a look at it. But just before we do that, one of the reasons why I've always felt that working in a network environment, and especially a social network environment, is that as you do your work, your day-to-day activities, the production of videos like this or doing sketch notes or whatever, these activities are detected by all the other people in your social network. And their reactions to what you do could, in essence, form a type of recognition of achievement. What do you think about that?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I think yes. I think certainly the idea of there's a lot of discussion in the e-credentialing badge community about perpetuation of power structures, where Serge Rivet talks about the poor punter begging to be recognized for what they know. And in fact, your peers can say what you know. Certainly there was an online conference happening yesterday, and there was a lot of tweets about it. And what's the name of the Scottish guy that does all the interesting stuff with the maps?
The maps. I'm the Scottish guy. I was thinking Ewan McIntosh. Is that who you mean?
No, Martin Hoxie.
Oh, Martin Hoxie. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So he was generating these live maps of people's tweets, and people's names were big because there were a lot of people connecting to them and retweeting them, etc. So it was a nice sort of 3D view, and I wasn't as big as I hoped to be. But it was a nice 3D view, so people's names were big, so people's names were small, and some were dense with connections, and others weren't. And so it was. It kind of relates to what you're talking about, neurons and things like that, where connections between people become more established, and people go there more quickly. And then, but it still accommodates emergent things, so the person can actually penetrate that.
I look at those sorts of things, and I'm always resistant to the idea that it's the number of connections that matters, because there are plenty of ways of getting many connections. You can be like Khloe Kardashian or something.
That's true.
Twitter keeps saying you should follow Demi Lovato. I don't even know who Demi Lovato is.
Right.
But it's interesting, because if you have a map like that, and you look at that map and you see all of these connections between individuals, I would think that at a certain point you can see patterns taking shape in that network of interactions. And it would be the recognition of those patterns that points you to, if you will, the key nodes, the key people in that network.
Right. There's one thought I wanted to leave you with before you go on to the Grasshopper stuff in detail, and that is there's a certain multinational organization that's looking into open badges as tools for like an emergent knowledge ecosystem. And one example they gave me was, let's say there's one of their sort of regional offices in a faraway country comes up with a cool new way of doing something. How do you disseminate that knowledge? Well, they could set themselves up as somebody who could badge that. So in other words, they could say, come to us and we'll teach you how to be really agile or whatever. And then that's not only that's advertising what they know, but it's also making it easy for other people to know that also. You know what I mean? So it kind of relates to your connectivist notion, but I think I need to develop it more.
There's even a hint of social engineering in that, in the sense that it would motivate these different divisions to specialize. So you could see them, for example, say in Mumbai saying, we're first on blockchain. We could become really good at blockchain and develop an expertise in it and contribute that.
That's true. I like that.
So let's take a look at the inside of the system, and this is people. Oh, I'm not sharing it. So,
sorry, Stephen. Can you dump me off and I'll start following again, because I haven't been able to see much the last little while.
Yeah, that's true, eh? Okay, how do I kick you off here? No, that wasn't it. Oh, here we go. I found it. It's a command that says eject. So eject.
Oh my God.
Yep. Okay. Thanks a lot, Don Prison, for joining us and with some fascinating discussion about credentialing. And I have mixed views about it. as he said, people look for, want, and value these credentials. On the other hand, just piling a bunch of credentials is like piling up a bunch of followers on Twitter or something. It is, in itself, it doesn't mean a whole lot. But, you know, I mean, you want to be recognized for the work that you do. And, you know, me as well as every other person, I guess. So let's pop in now to into Grasshopper. And so here we go. So this is where I start Grasshopper, and I actually have a bookmark. It's right up here. And this is the Grasshopper client for my own website, but I also have one for the course, this course. As you can see, it's very similar. I have one for the newspaper that I run out of Moncton, called Moncton Free Press, and it looks like this. So it's a little more elaborate, and it's being annoying. I don't know why it's doing that. It's, well, I'm not as good as I would like to be with page formatting. And it is this that we used for the original connectivism course. Well, I'm not sure if I'm currently logged into it. No, I'll just get a login screen. So this is personal learning environments, network and knowledge from 2010. So you can see I still have the whole thing set up, and you can still access these courses. So when I'll go back to this one, because I know I'm logged in, etc. So the way this is structured is on the left-hand side, I have the different types of entity that I'm working with. Now, way in the back of my mind, I'm thinking I really should only be working with one type of entity, a node. But I wasn't thinking that when I first started the system. But these are the different things, the different kind of things that you'll see me working with. So feeds and pages and posts and publications, etc. So when I talk about aggregation, for example, I'm talking about a list of feeds. So here's a list of feeds. Now, I've been on a kick recently where I've been using this site to aggregate podcasting sites in order to generate a podcast for Ed Radio. And this is actually working. It sort of chugs along in the background with 0 listeners, but it works. So, but as you can see now, there are different kinds of things that are in here. And we can look at any one of these, and it just pops into the standard editing window. So this right here, this link here, is the actual address out there on the internet that I'm harvesting from. So they post or publish this to the internet. This is the BBC site, The Philosopher's Arms. And if we look at the source, we can see messy XML. But the nice thing about this messy XML is that machines read it pretty well. There's a new format called JSON, JSON, which machines read even better. And I spent some time over the last little while creating the capacity to harvest JSON in Grasshopper. And so we have, for example, see if I can't find it. Here we go. The directory of open access journals, e-learning category. So I'm able to harvest that. That's a JSON feed. And if we view the feed, so here it is, and here are the recent posts that have been harvested from that feed. Actually, I'm looking at that feed. I see I still have a few errors in that feed, but fix one thing, break another. That's the nature of software. So anyhow, what happens is all of these things are harvested. So the contents of these feeds are read by the software and rules are applied to them. So here's a set of rules. They're a bit hard to read, but basically they tell the system what to do with something that comes in. For example, if the title is something, or if it contains something, or if it's not something, then the system should perform some action. For example, it should set the category of something to something else, or it should extract a URL from a big long URL. This is how I get rid of some of the garbage that comes in on feeds, like the UTM stuff. Or you can extract a subset, or you can auto post. You might be asking, what do I mean by that? So the content comes in as a link. So here it is. This is the raw data that gets harvested. So here's the EduTalk radio, download list Cameron, right? So that came in, that's a link. But if I say auto post, then it gets promoted to a post. On my system, a post is something that I'm actually publishing or sharing with people. And in addition to auto posting from links, I can also write my own posts. And in OL Daily, that's what I do. I start with this screen, which is the screen for writing a post, and I type in my content here. I can publish to Twitter or Facebook. In fact, let's do that right now, just for fun. And even funner, let's NRC01PL. We'll put that in the title, and now I'll update this. So since I put the hashtag in the title and published it to Twitter, it's going to be harvested by the course version of Grasshopper, and you'll see it in your newsletter tomorrow. So think about this. You'll see this headline in your newsletter tomorrow. Now I'm going to remove this because now it's published in Twitter. I don't need the hashtag in it anymore. So if we go to Twitter, and let's go to OL Daily in Twitter, and there we go. And see, there it is, NRC01PL, how not to write about grade inflation. So I've just published that to the OL Daily account in Twitter. And we'll take a look here. Here are some of the other things that people have been posting. Autumn Kane saying, I don't like the language of learner is a product. Don't mind thinking of learners as outcomes. Interesting. So we have to think about that. I'm going to come back and read these later because I'm getting a little off topic. So anyhow, what happens in the course version of Grasshopper. So here we are, we're back into the course. Here's the list of feeds. There's not very many right now. I was going to get you all to enter in your feeds this week, but then our website went down. But we'll get to that in a bit. But anyhow, here's the NRC01PL Twitter feed. You can see it's feed type Twitter. And if I view this feed, it's not going to look right because in this case, it's only saved as links. It never actually advances to posts. But here are all the links that I've harvested from this feed and from the Dijo account. So when you submit something on Twitter or something on Dijo, this system harvests it and puts it in the newsletter. You might ask, how does it put it in the newsletter? So here's what Grasshopper does that Delicious doesn't do, that Dijo doesn't do, that Google Reader never did. I've got pages. Oh, yes, I've got pages. So here's a bunch of pages. Now, this is pages I used for other stuff as well as for this course, because it's a bit of, a work in progress. But here is the page for the NRC01PL daily newsletter. So you should recognize some of this. I'll make this a bit bigger so you can see it a bit easier. So welcome to NRC01PL. This is your daily newsletter. So let's take a look and see what it looks like right now. So this is yesterday's announcement on yesterday's resources. These will eventually expire and be replaced with today's announcement and today's resources. And then here are the Twitter posts. And so we've got some stuff from March 8th and from March 9th. And so, including something from Don that he wrote, I guess, sometime in the future. That's kind of interesting. I don't know how he did that, because it's, anyhow. He can't, well, depends on where he is, I guess. If you're in Europe, the future is now. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. So anyhow, if we look here, the way the page works is I have commands here, and basically what these commands do, I call them keyword commands. Let's make this a bit bigger even still. And this keyword command extracts content from these entities on the side. So db equals post, type equals announcement. So that's how I get the announcement. Tells them how to format it, tells them how many hours ago before they expire, etc. Here's the links that are coming in from Dijo or anything that I've input in personally. And here are the Twitter posts. Expires in 40 hours, as I like to give it a little bit of room. Number equals 100, just in case. There's an awful lot of activity that I wasn't expecting, etc. And then the rest of the text. So what I do is I have this page, and then I come down here. I publish it to this website. I archive it. That's how I generate these archives that you can see here. So here are the archives. Here's yesterday's newsletter, etc. And I can auto send. Right now I haven't been auto sending, but I will be auto sending once I'm comfortable that things are going into the newsletter and not producing disasters. So right now I'm sending you to it. When new people sign on, are they auto subscribed? Yes, although one of the problems is OpenEdX doesn't really like to talk to external systems. There's no direct way of getting the list of participants in the course from OpenEdX. So we actually have to export an Excel file from OpenEdX, and I have to input it into this system. Very annoying. But that's the way OpenEdX is designed. So we come over here to the newsletters. So here I select my newsletter, I select an action, and when I click this button, which I will not right now, that sends a newsletter to all of you. I can auto subscribe people, I can choose different email programs, etc. Here's the harvester itself. So this is how I manage the harvester. I can do things like download the audio recording. I can automatically create a playlist. This is stuff that I created for the other site where I'm creating a podcast. I can run the harvester. I even have a viewer. I'm not sure what this will look like at the moment. So this is a way for me to look at all of the different links that I've harvested over 15,000 things. So over the years in this case, and I should be able to narrow this down a bit. So this is something that I use in the background, and here we go, something from February. So I got 202 Twitter posts. So here we go again. I'm looking at the Twitter post. This is my personal viewer that I, as the operator of Grasshopper, I have this view that I can use in order to view the harvested material. Let's go back. So I can do a bunch of other stuff as well. And there's a bunch of stuff that we don't use. Like there's data, I can import and export data. I can schedule meetings. Now, one of my plans was to use Big Blue Button when I do this course again, and I will do this course again. I'm going to set it up to use Big Blue Button because I've written an API and I tested it in Berlin last December. It still works. So I can just, with one click of one button, start up a Big Blue Button meeting. I like that so much better than I like working with Hangouts on air. Permissions, here's the permission matrix so that I can show what people can look at, what people can approve, edit, etc. Better not show you all that stuff. There's passwords there. So some of the other contents that I work with here, persons, this is all the list of people that might be subscribed to stuff, the list of other pages, list of authors, list of feeds, files that I've harvested. This is the graph. My system generates a graph. So feed 68, link 2209, etc. Feed 68, that'll be the Twitter probably. Some posts with some files. These are posts that I created and I uploaded some images. Feed 73 is Djo, and again, linking to posts, etc. So there is a graph back end to Grasshopper, but you never really see it come into play. It does come into play, and I do use it in order to format some of the things that you see on the screen. Another thing I have in the back end is what I call a view. So you remember I was talking about the format of how to present something. So this is what determines that. So post, link, email is what determines how you see the post that I'm showing you in the email. So here again, I have some wildcards that I just fill with things like the post ID, the post description, etc. So that's a really quick look at Grasshopper. I hope you enjoyed that. I noticed that most of the viewers are still here. And as you can see, what I tried to do is to build into this technology all the flexibility that I didn't have with your traditional learning management system. I had the ability to harvest content from anywhere and content of any type, the ability to create my own pages, to create my own feeds. I use the same system to create RSS feeds, podcasts, whatever I want, JSON files, anything, any format I want. I can use the views that I just showed you in order to generate output of that formula, calendar files, ICS and whatever. And as well, it allows me to mix and match stuff and send it off as email newsletters and manage the subscriptions to all of that. So it's a different approach to content. It's an approach to content that views content as inherently open. It views content as something that flows. We don't have this static base of content that we're working from. We're working with this dynamic, changing, ever-flowing body of content. And to take a course using a system like this isn't to have a body of content transferred to you, is to put yourself into what Dave Weiner calls, this stream of content or this river of content, and navigate for a while and get a feel for what it's like to work with that kind of content. And then when you're done, get out of your canoe and move on to something else. Okay, that wraps it up for this week. I hope you found that interesting. The website is back up. I have a bunch of stuff to transfer from the various places I put it to the website because I've been locked out of it as well, right? So we'll get this recording up as soon as possible. We'll get the other content up, and we'll begin to look at how you can submit the URLs for your blogs or your contributions so that if you write a post in your environment about this course, it gets harvested and shared with everyone else in the course. But that's for tomorrow, the next day, maybe next week, because we suffer some delays. But anyhow, I'm Stephen Downs. It's been a pleasure having you all with me, and I'll talk to you next week. And next week, I spend part of the time in Moncton, New Brunswick, and so we'll be on air on Tuesday, and then the rest of the time in San Diego, California, where our Friday Hangout will take place. And watch your newsletters for the exact times and the URLs for those. So I'll see you then. Signing out. Bye, everyone.